In this presentation, we will be talking about issues and conclusions. I will provide some examples of how you can find the issues, and then we will also look at a short paragraph on how we can identify the conclusions and the issues. Okay? All right, so when we talk about conclusions and issues, okay, this is a quick review because you all have read your chapter already, and so I just want to go over it to clarify anything that you may have missed. When we talk about the issue, it is the basic question of the argument. The key word here is it is a question. So whenever I'm asking you for the issue, I am asking you to tell me the question of the argument. So it should always be stated in a question format. And then the conclusion is the main point of the argument. And so sometimes the main point of the argument is stated in the argument. Sometimes it's not stated and it can be inferred. One of the things that I want you to remember is many times to find the issue, you need to find the conclusion first. So it's kind of working backwards. If you can find the conclusion, the issue is going to be you can easily find the issue. And so I want you to keep that in mind as we're going through some of the practice, okay? All right, so what I want you to do is practice writing the issues or stating the issue as I'm going through this. And then I also want us to review prescriptive and descriptive issues. So as we've identified the issue or the question, then see if we can remember or identify if it's a prescriptive or descriptive issue. So in this first example, the conclusion is the majority of the people's tax dollars should be used for prisoner rehabilitation. That is the conclusion of what the author's argument is. Even though we didn't read it, that is the conclusion that the author is making. The author is stating that the majority of people's tax dollars should be used for prisoner rehabilitation. So the question is, what is the issue that the author is presenting to us? Okay, the issue that we are arguing about. And so because we know the conclusion, we will take the conclusion and we will change it into the issue. And the issue that the author is presenting to us is, should the majority of the people's tax dollars be used for prisoner rehabilitation? And we basically use the same language, but we just turn it into a question. And that's all you're doing when you are finding the issue. If you can identify the conclusion, you're using the same language and you're just turning it into a question. So now we ask, what type of issue is this? If we know this by reading the question, is this issue a descriptive issue or is it a prescriptive issue? If it is a descriptive issue, it is describing the way the world was, the way the world is, or will be. It's describing patterns using data, numbers, describing patterns of behavior. If it's a prescriptive issue, it is a debatable issue. There's no clear right and wrong. It's possible that both sides of the argument can make a strong argument for whichever position or stance they take. So based on this question here, this argument is likely a prescriptive issue, okay? Both sides can make it's a possibility they can make strong arguments for both stance, and so it's debatable, and it could be it is a prescriptive issue, okay? All right, let's look at another example. Here's the conclusion. There are alternatives to the death penalty. So at the end of the argument, the author is being clear and the author is saying there are alternatives to the death penalty. How can we take that same language and change it into a question because when we change into a question, it becomes our issue, okay? The question of the argument that is being made. So see if you can come up with the issue yourself based on the first example that we did. And if you don't write it down, at least, try to come up with one verbally, okay? So the issue based on the conclusion is, are there alternatives to the death penalty? Okay, so again, I took the same language, I just changed it into a question format. What is the argument we're making here? The argument or the issue at hand is, are there alternatives to the death penalty? So what type of issue is this? This is a descriptive issue. Because can I find patterns? Are there patterns, other things, other alternatives that has been done in place of the death penalty? Sure, we could probably describe those states that have banned the death penalty. What have they done? Okay, so we can describe practices that are currently being implemented. So this is a descriptive issue. All right, let's go ahead and try one more. Okay. The death penalty is the only way to achieve justice for victims' families. What is the issue in this argument? And remember, the issue is in a question format. Take a moment to see if you can come up with the issue on your own. Okay, one possible issue, or the issue that is stated for this conclusion is the death penalty the only way to achieve justice for victims' families? So now, is this issue a prescriptive issue or is it a descriptive issue? Well, this issue here is prescriptive. Why is that? Because it's debatable. Some families are like, you know what? This person has to die and that is justice. Another argument could be that the death penalty is not necessary because for other families, justice is letting them rot in prison and they shouldn't have it so easily by simply dying. And so again, it's debatable. It's not a clear black and white. So this issue is prescriptive. Okay. And so what I just did was gave you some examples of when you can find the conclusion, then finding the issue and the type of issue is very easy. So I'm going to show you one example of a short paragraph, and in this short paragraph, we're going to try to find the conclusion and the issue. In this case here, the issue is not given, the conclusion is not given to us. So here is an example of one that gives us the context, but we have to figure out the conclusion in the issue. It says corporate managers are always interested in techniques for increasing the productivity of their workdays. One interesting suggestion made by productivity consultants is to pipe music into the work area. Several recent studies have explored the extent to which different types of music affect worker output. The primary hypothesis examined in the studies was that soft rock music would prove the greatest aid to productivity. The research has found almost universally that country and Western music is the greatest inducement to efficiency. Therefore, corporate officials should seriously consider playing country and Western music as a stimulus to worker productivity. So when I read this, it gives me some background information of how they came up with their conclusion. And when I read this, one word that really stuck out to me in this paragraph is the last sentence where it says therefore. In the textbook, it talks about indicator words, and therefore is a type of indicator word, and it's used to tell you what the author's conclusion is. And so because there's an indicator word, finding the author's conclusion is very simple. So we can say that the conclusion is playing Western and country music stimulates worker productivity. That's the whole point that the author is trying to make. That's the conclusion of the argument that the author is making, is that we need to play more country Western music because it stimulates, or it helps worker productivity level increase greatly. Okay, now the question that so now that we have the conclusion, then we need to find the issue. And a lot of times it's just using the same language but changing it around. So what is the issue of this argument? The issue of the argument is which type of music stimulates worker productivity. And this one didn't use the same language, okay, but we can even turn around and say, does Western and country music stimulate worker productivity? That would have worked also, okay? And so I didn't include this in the slide here, but the type of issue, okay, this is a descriptive issue because it talks about research that has found data within the research, okay? And so because of the data, then I can describe what has worked and what hasn't worked. So therefore, this is a descriptive issue. So what I did in this example for you was I showed you a paragraph in which you have to find the conclusion. Once you found the conclusion, it's easy to find the issue, and it's easy to identify what type of issue this is.